I'm Samantha, 28, and last Thanksgiving changed my life forever. There I was, surrounded by crystal and silver in my parents' Connecticut mansion, when my father cleared his throat. "We've decided to cut you off financially," he announced, his voice echoing across the silent dining room. 20 pairs of eyes landed on me as he continued. "You've been wasting your potential living off family money." My fork clattered against fine china. Mom stared at her plate. My brother Nathan smirked. I couldn't breathe as judgment filled the room. Before I dive into this nightmare, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me for more real-life drama. Trust me, you'll want to see how I fought back against a family conspiracy that nearly destroyed me. To understand the betrayal, you need to understand the Montgomerys. We aren't just wealthy. We're Connecticut real estate royalty. Montgomery Properties develops luxury homes and commercial buildings across New England. The business started with my grandfather, and now my father Richard runs it with an iron fist. Dad always commanded a room, whether it was our massive dining room or a boardroom filled with executives. 6'2" with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing blue eyes that could freeze you mid-sentence. He wasn't cruel exactly, but results were everything to him. Emotions were messy distractions. "Business is about discipline and strategic thinking, Samantha," he'd lecture whenever I showed interest in art. "Your little drawings won't build a legacy." My mother Barbara was his perfect complement. Blonde, elegant, always composed. She came from money, too old Boston money, and knew exactly how to be the corporate wife. She hosted the perfect parties, supported all the right charities, and never contradicted my father in public. When Dad would criticize my art, she'd squeeze my hand under the table but remain silent. Then there was Nathan, my older brother by 4 years. The golden child. He had Dad's height and Mom's blonde good looks, an MBA from Wharton and Dad's business instincts. He joined Montgomery Properties right after graduation and was already being groomed to take over someday. I was the family disappointment. Instead of business school, I went to RISD for painting. Dad paid for it, reluctantly warning me that indulging in hobbies wouldn't prepare me for the real world. "You'll come around eventually," he'd say. "The Montgomery name means something. You can't hide from that responsibility forever." For years we maintained an uneasy peace. I pursued my art while accepting the financial support that came with being a Montgomery. I had a trust fund, a credit card linked to the family accounts, and a beautiful apartment Dad owned in Boston. I wasn't exactly a struggling artist, and maybe that made me complacent. The first hint that something was wrong came 3 months before that fateful Thanksgiving. My credit card was declined at an art supplies store. Embarrassed, I called the bank, assuming it was a mistake. "I'm sorry, Miss Montgomery, but that account has been closed," the representative explained. I called my father immediately. "Just a necessary adjustment," he said vaguely. "We'll discuss your new budget when you're home next." But we never did have that conversation. Instead, there were more troubling signs. My brother Nathan, who usually ignored me, suddenly started asking probing questions about my spending and career plans during our monthly family dinners. "Still just painting, huh?" he'd ask with that smirk. "How much does that even bring in?" My mother grew increasingly distant on our weekly calls. When I mentioned the credit card issue, she quickly changed the subject. "Your father knows what's best," she said, her voice tight. "He's just concerned about your future." Perhaps most unsettling was Uncle Robert's sudden interest in my life. Dad's younger brother had always been the more approachable Montgomery, less intense than my father. He ran the financial side of Montgomery Properties, while Dad handled acquisitions and development. Usually Uncle Robert treated family gatherings as opportunities to relax away from business, but in the months before Thanksgiving, he cornered me repeatedly. "How's that little studio of yours?" he asked at a family dinner in October. "Your father mentions you've had some rather substantial expenses lately." I laughed it off. "Just normal art supplies, Uncle Robert. Canvases aren't cheap." He nodded, but his eyes were calculating. "We all need to be careful with family resources, Samantha. Times change. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I received a notice that the maintenance fees for my apartment had not been paid for 2 months. When I called the property management company, they informed me that the automatic payments from the family office had been stopped. I left messages for my father that weren't returned. When I finally reached my mother, she sounded flustered. "It's not a good time to discuss this, dear. Your father's been very busy with a new development project. We'll sort everything out at Thanksgiving." And so I arrived at the family estate that Thursday unsettled but unprepared for what was coming. The mansion was decorated impeccably as always. Fall flowers, polished silver, the finest linens. The extended family was all there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my ancient grandmother who rarely left her wing of the house. I noticed the whispers that stopped when I entered rooms. The way conversations shifted when I approached. Even my cousin Emma, usually friendly, seemed uncomfortable around me. Only Nathan seemed happy to see me, which should have been my biggest warning sign of all. I fled the Thanksgiving dinner table in tears, ignoring my mother's weak Samantha pleas, as I ran past startled servers carrying dessert. Outside, I gulped cold November air, fumbling for my car keys with shaking hands. No one followed me. No one tried to stop me. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Emma, "I'm so sorry." Then nothing from any other family member. The silence was deafening. I drove back to Boston in a fog, barely registering the 3-hour journey. My apartment, technically my father's apartment, suddenly felt precarious. I checked my bank accounts on my phone at red lights. My personal checking account had a balance of $1,842.76. My savings account, which had held over $30,000 the last time I checked, was empty. My trust fund access was gone. When I reached my building, I pulled into the underground garage and sat there engine off, trying to process what had happened. My entire life had been built on the Montgomery Foundation. Without it, who was I? The next morning I called my best friend Heather, the only person I could think of who wouldn't judge me. "I need help," I admitted, something no Montgomery was ever supposed to say. Heather arrived at my apartment an hour later, took one look at my tear-stained face, and hugged me. "Stay with me until you figure this out," she offered immediately. My roommate just moved out. The timing's actually perfect. I spent that Friday in a panic, calling landlords and management companies. The news was all the same. My rent hadn't been paid in months, despite the automatic payments that should have been coming from the family office. "We've been sending notices, Miss Montgomery," my building manager said with thinly veiled irritation. "We'll need the full amount by the end of the month, or we'll have to proceed with eviction." That was less than a week away. I needed nearly $9,000 I didn't have. I started applying for jobs frantically. My resume was embarrassingly thin. 4 years at RISD, a few small gallery showings, some commissioned pieces for family friends. Nothing that screamed hire me immediately for a well-paying position. While waiting for responses, I began the painful process of cataloging my possessions. My painting supplies were thousands, but difficult to resell quickly. Designer clothes and bags. Gifts from my mother that could fetch something on consignment. My car, a 3-year-old BMW that was worth at least $30,000, but selling it meant losing my transportation. On Monday morning, I had 3 job interviews lined up. 2 at galleries and 1 at a graphic design firm. I dressed in my most professional outfit, prepared my portfolio, and felt a glimmer of hope. I could do this. I could stand on my own. Then the calls started coming in. The gallery in Newbury Street, something unexpected came up. "We need to reschedule." The design firm, "We've actually decided to go with another candidate." The second gallery, "The position has been filled internally." All within an hour. All with the same awkward tone. I sat on a bench in Boston Common, trying not to cry in public. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Montgomery Properties carries weight in Boston." Did you really think it would be so easy? In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just my father cutting me off. Someone was actively working to destroy me. Later that day, my old art professor, Diane, called me out of the blue. "Samantha, I heard you might be looking for work. I need help at the gallery 2 days a week. It's not much, but it's something." I almost cried with relief. "How did you know?" There was an uncomfortable pause. "I got a strange call asking about your character, if you were reliable. It seemed odd. Is everything okay?" So they were checking up on me, perhaps not expecting Diane to reach out directly. I accepted the job on the spot, $15 per hour, 16 hours a week. Barely enough to buy groceries, but it was income they couldn't block. That evening, I drove to my parents' house, determined to confront my father. The security guard at the gate looked uncomfortable, but let me through. The housekeeper answered the door with wide eyes. "Your father is in his study," she whispered. I didn't knock. Richard Montgomery looked up from his desk, his face hardening when he saw me. "I thought I made myself clear at dinner," he said coldly. Why are you doing this? I demanded. It's not just cutting me off. Someone is actively sabotaging me. Is it you? He stood up, towering over his massive oak desk. I've heard about your extravagant spending, Samantha. The parties, the trips, the special art supplies that somehow cost thousands. Did you think I wouldn't find out what you've really been doing with family money? I stared at him in genuine confusion. What are you talking about? I haven't taken any trips. What parties? He pulled out a folder and slapped several papers onto the desk. Credit card statements, bank withdrawals, receipts, all with my name showing expenses I'd never incurred. Someone is lying to you, I said, my voice shaking as I scanned the documents. This wasn't me. Nathan brought these to my attention, he said firmly. Unlike you, he's concerned about the family's reputation. And suddenly it clicked. Nathan, my perfect brother who had everything but still wanted more, who had access to family accounts, who had always resented the attention my mother gave me. Dad, you need to look closer. Nathan is… Enough, he thundered. I won't hear you slander your brother who's worked tirelessly for this family while you've been playing artist. You have 30 days to vacate the apartment. Your car lease will not be renewed. Consider yourself lucky I'm giving you that much. I left with the horrible certainty that someone had orchestrated my downfall, and my own father was too blind to see it. After a sleepless night on Heather's couch, I decided to fight back. If someone, likely Nathan, was setting me up, I needed proof. I started with what I had access to, my own documentation. I dug through years of bank statements, credit card bills, and receipts that I'd carelessly shoved into folders. A Montgomery never worried about money, so I'd never been particularly diligent about tracking expenses. That had to change. I created a detailed spreadsheet of my actual spending over the past year. Art supplies, rent, utilities, groceries, occasional dinners out, nothing extravagant by Montgomery standards. Then I compared it with the documents my father had shown me. The discrepancies were shocking. There were charges for hotels in Miami and Los Angeles during weeks I'd been in Boston. Jewelry purchases from high-end retailers I'd never visited. Cash withdrawals of thousands of dollars when I rarely used ATMs. Someone had created a paper trail of a spoiled, irresponsible trust fund kid, a caricature that played perfectly into my father's fears about me. I needed to access the family office records to see how deep this went, but I had no allies there. All the financial staff reported to Uncle Robert, and they wouldn't risk their jobs to help me. Heather watched me, obsessively compiling evidence with growing concern. Sam, you need to eat something, she said, setting a sandwich next to my laptop. And maybe sleep occasionally. I can't, I said, scrolling through another statement. They've been planning this for months. I need to figure out who they are. While working at Diane's gallery that weekend, I answered a call from a blocked number. Hello, Montgomery Gallery. Samantha. It was Nathan's voice, smooth and satisfied. Quaint little job you found. Does it cover the BMW payments? My hand tightened on the phone. What do you want, Nathan? To check on my little sister. Family concerns and all that. Cut the crap, I hissed, checking to make sure Diane wasn't within earshot. I know what you did. The fake expenses, the calls to potential employers. Why? There was a pause, then a soft laugh. You always were smarter than Dad gave you credit for. Not smart enough, though. Tell me why I insisted. You really don't know. Another laugh. Dad was planning to put you in charge of our new arts district development. You with your connections to creative types and your useless art degree. A division that should have been mine. I nearly dropped the phone. What are you talking about, Dad? Never mentioned any arts district. Of course not. It was supposed to be a surprise. His way of finally finding a place for his disappointment of a daughter. I heard him discussing it with the board. Can you imagine years of business school working my way up, and he was going to hand you a major division because you can finger paint? So you decided to destroy me. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. This was my brother who had pulled me on sleds when we were kids, who had taught me to swim in the lake behind our summer home. I decided to show Dad who you really are, an entitled, irresponsible drain on family resources. He needed to see that blood isn't always the best qualification. His voice hardened. Stay away from the family, Sam. You're done here. The line went dead. I stood frozen, processing this revelation. Nathan had methodically set me up, creating a false narrative about my character to poison Dad against me. And it had worked perfectly. That evening, I drove to our parents' house again, determined to tell my mother what Nathan had confessed. The security guard looked apologetic as he blocked my way. "I'm sorry, Miss Montgomery. Your access has been revoked." I called my mother repeatedly. When she finally answered, her voice was tight with strain. "Samantha, please stop this. You're only making things worse. Mom, Nathan confessed he made up those expenses. He's been lying to Dad about me because of some arts district project." There was a telling silence. "You knew," I realized, my stomach dropping. "You knew what he was doing." "I didn't know the details," she said quietly. "But Nathan explained his concerns about your reliability. The evidence was quite convincing, darling. And you believed him, without even asking me." "Richard makes the financial decisions in this family," she said, retreating to her familiar refrain. "It's not my place to interfere." "So you just let him destroy my relationship with Dad, with the entire family?" I couldn't keep the betrayal from my voice. "Nathan is the future of Montgomery Properties," she said, her voice growing distant. "Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good of the family." I hung up, reeling from this second betrayal. My own mother had stood by while Nathan systematically dismantled my life. The financial situation grew dire quickly. I received an eviction notice for the apartment. My student loan servicer began calling daily about missed payments. The BMW was repossessed from Heather's parking lot while I was at work. I took a second job at a coffee shop near the gallery, working mornings before my shifts with Diane. Between the two jobs, I barely made enough to contribute to Heather's rent and keep myself fed. Then came the social fallout. A college friend called after a charity event. "Sam, people are talking," she said uncomfortably. "Your father told the Whitneys you're dealing with addiction issues, that you're in some kind of downward spiral." My throat tightened. "That's not true. None of it's true." "I didn't think so," she said, but her tone was uncertain. It's everywhere now. The Montgomery family is worried about you, trying to get you help, but you're refusing. That kind of thing." One by one, invitations stopped coming. Former friends grew distant. Gallery owners who had expressed interest in my work suddenly wouldn't return calls. The Montgomery name that had once opened doors was now being used to systematically close them. I was completely alone, cut off not just financially but socially. Nathan had won. A week later, I was restocking coffee cups when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Not over the phone. Coffee shop on Newbury, 2 p.m. Come alone." "Emma?" My cousin Emma had always been friendly, but never particularly close. As Uncle Robert's daughter, she worked in the family business too, in the marketing department. I hesitated, wondering if this was another trap. Curiosity won out. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the door, half expecting Nathan to show up instead. Emma entered at exactly 2 p.m., her blonde hair tucked under a baseball cap, sunglasses hiding her eyes despite the cloudy day. She slid into the seat across from me, removing her sunglasses only after scanning the room. "I can't stay long," she said without preamble. "They can't know I'm talking to you." "They?" I asked. "Dad. Nathan." She leaned forward. "I believe you, Sam. About the fake expenses. About all of it." Relief washed over me. "How did you know?" "I've been watching Nathan. Something hasn't been right for months. Dad and he have been having these private meetings excluding everyone else. Then suddenly you're cut off, painted as this irresponsible party girl." She shook her head. "It didn't add up. Your father is involved too." My stomach dropped. Emma nodded grimly. "They're working together. I don't know exactly what they're planning, but it's bigger than just pushing you out. There's something happening with the business financials." "Why would you risk helping me?" I asked cautiously. She looked down at her coffee. "Because they're using the same playbook on me that they used on you. Small criticisms. Questioning my decisions. Dad suddenly reviewing all my marketing budgets. I think I'm next on the chopping block." We formed an alliance that day. Emma would be my eyes and ears inside Montgomery Properties while I worked to clear my name and figure out what Nathan and Uncle Robert were really up to. My first task was survival. With Emma's encouragement, I turned my art into a business. I created an Instagram account showcasing my work and offering commission pieces. Portraits, pet paintings, whatever would sell. I printed business cards with my new phone number. My old one had been on the family plan and was disconnected, and handed them out everywhere. To my surprise, orders started coming in. Small ones at first. A pet portrait here, a family scene there. I worked on them at night after my coffee shop and gallery shifts painting until my eyes burned and my hand cramped. Meanwhile, Emma began her covert operation. Once a week, we'd meet at different coffee shops where she'd pass me information, meeting notes, overheard conversations, financial reports she'd borrowed from her father's office. Nathan's been pushing to restructure the entire financial department, she told me during one meeting. He wants to replace people who've been with the company for decades with his own picks. People loyal to him instead of my father, I realized. Emma nodded. And Dad's board meetings have gotten weird. There's a development project they discuss only after the official minutes end. Something called Project Phoenix. The Arts District, Nathan mentioned. Maybe. But why all the secrecy for a legitimate development? Through Emma, I learned that my father had indeed been planning to put me in charge of a new cultural district development, a mixed-use project combining galleries, artist studios, and upscale housing. It would have been perfect for me combining my art background with the family business. Nathan had seen it as a threat to his authority, and perhaps as an opportunity. While gathering information, I focused on rebuilding my life. My commission business grew enough that I could quit the coffee shop. Diane increased my hours at the gallery. I moved from Heather's couch to a tiny studio apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Nothing like my luxurious former place, but mine paid for with money I earned myself. One evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Samantha Montgomery?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "Rachel Chen, Nathan's girlfriend." My guard immediately went up. "What do you want?" "To talk," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I know what Nathan did to you. I've seen the fake expense reports on his laptop." "Why should I trust you?" I asked. "Because I'm starting to see who he really is," she said quietly, "and it scares me." We arranged to meet at a restaurant far from any Montgomery haunts. Rachel was elegant and composed, but I could see the strain around her eyes. "Nathan talks in his sleep," she said after ordering. At first it was just mumbling, but lately, he's been saying things. About you, about your father, about money being moved. "What kind of money?" I asked sharply. "I don't know exactly. But he's been working on his laptop late at night, and I've seen spreadsheets with offshore account numbers." She twisted her napkin nervously. "Last week I heard him on the phone with your uncle. They were arguing about accelerating the timeline now that you were handled." A chill ran through me. This wasn't just about sabotaging my career opportunity. Nathan and Uncle Robert were planning something that required getting me out of the way first. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Rachel looked up, her expression pained. "Because I thought I was dating a hard-working, ambitious man. Now I'm afraid I'm dating someone who would destroy his own sister, and possibly his father's company. I need to know what I'm involved with." I had another ally, though, a reluctant one. Rachel wouldn't actively spy for me, but she promised to let me know if she discovered anything concrete about Nathan's plans. Emma continued gathering evidence, and a disturbing picture began to emerge. Uncle Robert had created a complex web of shell companies that seemed to be siphoning money from Montgomery properties. Nathan was helping cover the transactions as various development costs for projects that were moving suspiciously slowly. "I think they're embezzling," Emma whispered during one of our meetings. "And they needed you gone because you might have noticed the irregularities if you took over the Arts District project." "We need proof," I said. "Actual documents, not just suspicions." Emma nodded grimly. "I'm working on it. But be careful, Sam. They're watching for any sign you're fighting back." She wasn't wrong. A private investigator had started following me, not very subtly. I spotted the same nondescript sedan parked near my apartment several times. When I mentioned it to Emma, she wasn't surprised. Nathan hired him. "I saw the invoice on Dad's desk. They're looking for anything they can use against you if you try to approach your father again." Instead of making me retreat, their surveillance energized me. They wouldn't be watching if they weren't afraid of what I might discover. Number. Part 6. The second major betrayal. 3 months after being cut off, I received a text from my mother: "Lunch tomorrow. Just us, the bistro on Charles Street, 1 p.m. I stared at my phone in disbelief. After months of silence, this casual invitation, as if nothing had happened, I called Emma immediately. "It's a trap," she said without hesitation. "Uncle Robert was in Dad's office today with your mother. They were talking about you." "What should I do?" Emma paused. "Go, but be on guard. Find out what they want." The next day, I dressed carefully in clothes I had purchased with my own money. A simple blouse and pants, no designer labels. I arrived early, choosing a table with my back to the wall. My mother swept in 15 minutes late, looking elegant as always in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She air-kissed my cheek before sitting down. "You look thin," she said, her gaze critical. "Are you eating properly?" "I'm fine, Mom," I replied stiffly. "Why did you want to meet?" She signaled for the waiter, ordering a salad and sparkling water before answering me. "I'm worried about you, darling. This situation has gone on long enough. I think it's time we found a way forward." "A way forward," I repeated. "After Dad publicly humiliated me, after Nathan fabricated evidence to destroy my reputation, after you stood by and let it happen." Her perfectly maintained composure slipped slightly. "It's been difficult for everyone, Samantha. Your father is under tremendous stress with the business. Nathan is just trying to prove himself. By destroying me, I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "I've been thinking about what you said, about Nathan manipulating the financial records." She lowered her voice. "I believe you might be right." I stared at her, hope and suspicion warring within me. "You do?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears that seemed genuine. "I've noticed things. Richard working late, looking worried. Nathan and Robert having private conversations that stop when I enter the room." She squeezed my hand. "I want to help you make things right with your father." For a moment, I allowed myself to believe her, to imagine that my mother had finally chosen me over family politics. "I need you to explain everything," she continued, her voice gentle. "All the details of what you think happened. What Nathan did, what Robert might be involved in. Your father respects evidence, Samantha. If we present him with a clear case, he'll listen." Relief flooded through me. I began talking, telling her everything. The fake expenses, Nathan's confession about the arts district, Uncle Robert's involvement, even my suspicions about embezzlement. My mother listened intently, asking, clarifying questions, seeming genuinely appalled by the extent of the deception. "We need to take this to your father immediately," she said when I finished. "He needs to know what's happening under his nose." I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in months. "When?" "Let me talk to him first," she said, gathering her purse. "Prepare him. He's more likely to listen coming from me initially. I'll call you tomorrow." She hugged me before leaving, holding on longer than usual. "I love you, Samantha. Never doubt that." I walked home with my head high, finally seeing a path to vindication. My mother believed me. Soon my father would know the truth. The next day passed with no call from her. Then another. I tried calling her, but my calls went straight to voicemail. 3 days after our lunch, I received an email from my father's attorney. Attached was an audio file with a brief message. "Before you consider any legal action against the Montgomery family, you should listen to this." I clicked play with trembling fingers. It was a recording of my lunch with my mother. But it had been edited, skillfully cutting out her questions and comments, leaving only my voice, making accusations against Nathan and Uncle Robert, speculating about embezzlement, sounding paranoid and vindictive. The betrayal knocked the breath from my lungs. My own mother had recorded our conversation, then allowed it to be manipulated to make me sound unhinged. I called Emma in tears. She set me up. My own mother. Emma was silent for a long moment. "Sam, there's more. Dad showed the recording to the entire executive team this morning. They're considering a restraining order against you for making false and damaging claims about company executives." My gallery job disappeared the next day. Diane couldn't look me in the eye as she explained that she'd received calls from several major donors threatening to withdraw support if she continued employing me. "They're saying you've been making wild accusations about Montgomery properties," she said uncomfortably. "That you're unstable, possibly dangerous. I can't risk the gallery, Samantha. I'm sorry." My commission work dried up too. Clients canceled orders requesting refunds. Someone had been contacting them, warning them about working with me. Within a week of my mother's betrayal, I was nearly broke again. My rent was due and I had no income. Even Heather was keeping her distance, uncomfortable with the intensity of the Montgomery family vendetta. I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, surrounded by half-finished canvases, and considered giving up. Maybe I should just leave Boston, start over somewhere the Montgomery name meant nothing. That night, Rachel called. "Nathan's out of town for a business trip," she said without preamble. "He left his laptop at home. The password is your birthday, ironically." "What?" "His laptop password. It's your birthday. I thought you should know." She hung up abruptly. I sat frozen, processing what she'd just told me. Nathan's laptop would have evidence of everything, the fake expenses, the embezzlement scheme, all of it. But breaking into his apartment was criminal trespassing at minimum. Before I could decide what to do with this information, Emma called with devastating news. "Sam, I'm in the hospital. There was an accident." Her voice was weak. "What happened?" I asked already, reaching for my coat. I was accessing files in Dad's office after hours. Someone came in. I hid, but when I tried to leave later, the stairwell door was locked. I had to use the fire escape. It was dark. The metal was slick from rain. She paused, her breath labored. I fell. Broke my leg in 2 places. Concussion. They're keeping me for observation. "This wasn't an accident," I said. Cold certainty settling in my stomach. "No," Emma agreed quietly. "I think they knew I was helping you. Be careful, Sam. They're serious about silencing anyone who threatens them." With Emma in the hospital, I had lost my inside source of information. But Rachel had just handed me another opportunity. The next day, I received a certified letter. Uncle Robert had filed a police report accusing me of embezzling funds from Montgomery properties during my time on the family accounts. There was no arrest warrant yet, but the investigation was ongoing. They were setting me up to take the fall for their own crimes. If I was convicted of financial fraud, no one would believe any accusations I made against Nathan or Uncle Robert. I was out of options and running out of time. That night, I made my decision. I would get Nathan's laptop and find the evidence I needed to clear my name, even if it meant breaking the law to do it. I decided to stop playing defense. Nathan and Uncle Robert had systemically dismantled my life, using the family's power and connections against me. Fighting to regain my father's approval was a losing strategy. He was too deep under their influence. Instead, I needed to focus on exposing their corruption. If I could prove Nathan and Uncle Robert were embezzling from Montgomery properties, my father would have to listen. Not because he believed in me, but because he'd need to protect the company. First, I needed access to Nathan's laptop. Rachel had given me the password, but getting into his apartment was the challenge. Security at his luxury building was tight, and I was certain my name was on a list of people not to admit. I called Rachel. "I need your help. Just this once." She hesitated. "What kind of help?" "I need to get into Nathan's apartment while he's away." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, she whispered Friday night, 8 p.m. "I'll leave a key with the doorman for my sister, who's watering my plants. You'll have about 2 hours while I'm at a work dinner with Nathan." It wasn't breaking and entering if I had a key, and the doorman's permission, I reasoned, trying to calm my nerves. While waiting for Friday, I focused on rebuilding my professional network outside my family's influence. The art world had always been my sanctuary. Now it would be my power base. I reached out to James Harrington, an influential gallery owner I'd met at a RISD alumni event years ago. I had avoided leveraging the connection before wanting to succeed on my own merits, rather than through networking. That luxury was gone now. "Samantha Montgomery," he said when I called. "I've been hearing some concerning things about you." "All lies," I said firmly. "Created by people who want to destroy me. But that's not why I'm calling. I want to show you my new work." He was skeptical, but agreed to look at my portfolio. I spent 3 days creating new pieces specifically for him. Bold, emotional paintings that channeled all the betrayal and determination I'd experienced. When we met at his gallery after hours, his expression shifted from polite interest to genuine excitement as he flipped through my portfolio. "This is exceptional," he admitted. "There's a raw power here I haven't seen before. What happened to you?" "Life," I said simply. "Are you interested in showing my work, or not?" He studied me, then nodded. "I can give you a small show next month. See how it goes." It was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild my reputation in a world beyond my family's reach. Friday night arrived. I wore nondescript clothing, tucked my hair under a cap, and kept my head down as I approached Nathan's building. The doorman barely glanced at my face as I signed in as Rachel's sister and took the elevator to the penthouse floor. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. I'd been in Nathan's apartment many times for family gatherings, but never like this, a trespasser searching for evidence of his crimes. I found his laptop in his home office and powered it on heart racing as I typed in my birth date. The password worked. I connected a thumb drive and began searching for incriminating files. It didn't take long to find what I needed. A folder labeled Project Phoenix contained spreadsheets tracking money movements through shell companies, fake invoices, and most damning of all, a document outlining the entire scheme. Uncle Robert and Nathan were systematically embezzling funds from Montgomery properties, disguising the theft as expenses for the Arts District development. They had created a network of shell companies that appeared to be legitimate contractors and consultants, but were actually controlled by Uncle Robert. I copied everything, hardly breathing until the transfer was complete. As I was about to shut down the laptop, an email notification appeared. It was from Uncle Robert to Nathan S. Problem escalating. Need to accelerate timeline. Meeting tomorrow 10 am to finalize PR strategy. I was the S problem, and they were planning their next move against me. As I was leaving, I noticed a hard copy of a document on Nathan's desk, a draft press release announcing that Montgomery Properties had uncovered evidence of embezzlement by a former employee, me. They were going to publicly accuse me of the very crimes they were committing. I photographed the press release with my phone before slipping out of the apartment. My hands didn't stop shaking until I was safely back in my own neighborhood. The evidence I'd gathered was damning, but I couldn't just take it to my father. Nathan and Uncle Robert would claim I had fabricated it all. I needed leverage and protection before making my move. The anonymous tip came 2 days later. Emma called from the hospital, her voice urgent. Someone sent financial documents to the Boston Globe business editor. They're asking questions about offshore accounts linked to Uncle Robert. It wasn't me, I said, genuinely surprised. I think it was Rachel, Emma said. She visited me yesterday asking questions about the company structure. She seemed determined. Rachel had made her choice, and it wasn't Nathan. The Montgomery empire was starting to crack. I focused on building my own power base. My small show at James's Gallery received unexpected attention from local arts publications. My raw, emotional paintings resonated with viewers in a way my earlier, safer work never had. 3 pieces sold on opening night. Not enough to make me wealthy, but enough to pay my rent and buy time. More importantly, I was establishing an identity separate from the Montgomery name. I signed my paintings simply Samantha, now letting my work speak for itself. Emma continued feeding me information from her hospital bed, accessing company emails through her phone. Nathan and Uncle Robert were scrambling to contain the damage from the leaked documents, pulling resources away from their campaign against me. Dad's asking questions now, Emma reported. The board is concerned about the Globe's investigation. Nathan and Uncle Robert are fighting behind closed doors. The balance of power was shifting. I was no longer just fighting to clear my name. I was building a case that could bring down the conspirators who had tried to destroy me. Rachel became a reluctant but crucial ally, continuing to provide information about Nathan's movements and plans. She was horrified by the extent of his deception, both of me and the company. He's not who I thought he was, she told me during a clandestine meeting. I keep thinking about what he did to you, his own sister. What would he do to me if I became inconvenient? Help me stop him, I urged her. For both our sakes. She nodded, determination hardening her features. What do you need? Everything you can find about Project Phoenix, and access to the executive floor during the next board meeting. As my gallery show gained attention, Nathan made his next move. He hired a private investigator to follow me, constantly documenting my movements, my contacts, even my art. I spotted him easily. A middle-aged man with a telephoto lens who made little effort to hide. Let him watch, I told Emma when she warned me about him. I have nothing to hide anymore. In fact, I began using the surveillance to my advantage, deliberately meeting with art critics and gallery owners in public places, ensuring Nathan would know my reputation was growing beyond his reach. The confrontation with Rachel came a week later. She stormed into my studio, unannounced, eyes red from crying. Nathan knows, she said without preamble. He knows I've been helping you. My stomach dropped. How? The PI followed me here last week. Nathan confronted me this morning. She paced the small room. He threatened to destroy my career, tell everyone I was involved in corporate espionage. What did you tell him? She stopped pacing, meeting my eyes with surprising resolve. That I knew what he'd done to you. That I had copies of everything. That if anything happened to me or my career, it would all go public. I stared at her in admiration. That was incredibly brave. She gave a shaky laugh. It was incredibly stupid. But I couldn't keep living the lie. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. He doesn't know about this. It's the complete Project Phoenix files, including recordings of meetings with Uncle Robert where they discussed the embezzlement explicitly. She placed it in my hand. Use it. End this. With Rachel's evidence and Emma's inside information, I now had a complete picture of Nathan and Uncle Robert's scheme. They had diverted over $30 million from Montgomery Properties into offshore accounts, planning to blame the missing funds on accounting errors, and if necessary on me. The final piece fell into place when Emma discovered Nathan had hidden the laptop I'd accessed, the one containing all the incriminating files, in a storage unit rather than destroying it. Overconfidence had always been his weakness. The police could get a warrant for that storage unit based on the evidence we have, Emma pointed out. I nodded, a plan forming. But first we need to make sure my father sees the truth. All of it. At once. In a way he can't ignore or explain away. The perfect opportunity was approaching Thanksgiving. 1 year after I'd been cut off, the family would gather again at the mansion. This time I would be ready. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Emma was finally released from the hospital. She invited me to her apartment to plan our next steps. When I arrived, the door was ajar. Emma, I called, pushing it open cautiously. I found her sitting stiffly on the couch, Uncle Robert standing behind her. His hand rested on her shoulder in what might have looked like a fatherly gesture to an outsider, but I could see his fingers digging into her collarbone. "Samantha," he said pleasantly, "how nice of you to join us for this family reunion." Emma's face was pale, her eyes communicating a silent warning. On the coffee table lay printouts of our text messages, emails, meeting notes. Everything. "Did you really think I wouldn't monitor my own daughter's communications?" Uncle Robert asked, his voice still eerily calm. "Especially after her accident." I moved toward Emma, but he tightened his grip, making her wince. "That's far enough. We're going to have a civilized conversation about your future, Samantha." "Let her go," I said evenly. "This is between us." Oh, Emma made her choice when she decided to betray her family. His smile never reached his cold eyes. "Just like you did." "You're the ones who betrayed the family," I shot back. "Stealing from the company, manipulating my father, trying to frame me." Allegations without proof, he dismissed. "Unlike the very real evidence Nathan and I have assembled against you." He nodded toward a folder on the table. I flipped it open to find documents bearing my signature, forged but convincingly, authorizing transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. "You're framing me for your embezzlement," I realized. "We're protecting the company from a disgruntled, unstable former employee who tried to steal from her own family," he corrected. Much more palatable to the board and shareholders than admitting 2 executives have been. Creatively allocating resources. Emma tried to stand, but he forced her back down. "Tell her the rest, Robert," she said through gritted teeth. His expression hardened. "There's a simple solution, Samantha. Sign a confession admitting to the embezzlement. Take full responsibility. In exchange, we ensure you avoid jail time. Just probation and mandatory psychiatric treatment. The family wealth remains intact, the company's reputation is preserved, and you get a fresh start." "A fresh start as a diagnosed mentally ill criminal," I laughed bitterly. "While you and Nathan keep stealing millions, it's the only option that keeps everyone safe," he said, his implication clear as his grip tightened again on Emma's shoulder. "Your father is prepared to pursue criminal charges otherwise. He's quite devastated by your betrayal." "He doesn't know the truth," I said. "He knows what we've told him," Uncle Robert countered. "And he believes us because we're the sons who stayed loyal while you rejected everything he built." I looked at Emma, seeing the fear in her eyes. Uncle Robert was threatening her to get to me. He would destroy her too if I didn't comply. "I need time to think," I said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning. 9 in my office. Sign the confession or I file charges against you, and Emma faces consequences for her involvement in your schemes." After he left, Emma collapsed against me, shaking. "I'm so sorry, Sam. He found everything. My phone, my email, my notes." "This isn't your fault," I assured her, though inside I was reeling. We'd been so close to exposing them, and now the tables had turned again. That night was the darkest of my life. I sat in my studio apartment, staring at blank canvases, contemplating surrender. Maybe Uncle Robert was right. A confession with probation was better than fighting a legal battle I couldn't win against opponents who had unlimited resources and were willing to sacrifice anyone, including Emma. I was out of moves, out of allies, out of hope. Then my phone rang. "Rachel." "Sam, thank God you answered," she said, her voice tense. Nathan got drunk tonight after a meeting with your uncle. He passed out, but before he did, he was ranting about having you arrested about Emma being next. He mentioned a laptop in storage unit 423 at Boston Security Storage that would finish you both. I think it's important. The laptop. The one I'd accessed in his apartment with all the original evidence of their scheme. He hadn't destroyed it. Rachel, I need one more favor, I said urgently. Anything. I need you to get into that storage unit. Tonight. There was a pause. Breaking and entering now, that's definitely illegal, Sam. So is what they're doing to me and Emma. Please, Rachel. It's our only chance. 2 hours later, she texted me an address. I found her waiting in her car, a laptop clutched to her chest. I had to bribe the night guard, she said, handing it to me. But it's all there, Sam. Everything. Financial records, emails between Nathan and your uncle planning how to frame you recordings of their conversations. Nathan kept it all as insurance against your uncle. I powered on the laptop, scarcely daring to hope. Rachel was right. Nathan had documented everything, protecting himself in case Uncle Robert ever turned on him. There were even videos of them discussing how they had manipulated my father, edited the recording of my lunch with my mother, and arranged Emma's accident. This is enough to put them both in prison, I breathed. Rachel nodded grimly. What are you going to do? Not sign that confession, for starters. I closed the laptop, mind racing with possibilities. Then make sure my father sees exactly who his son and brother really are. The next morning, I didn't show up at Uncle Robert's office. Instead, I took the laptop to a cybersecurity expert recommended by James, the gallery owner. We made secure copies of everything, storing them in multiple locations where Nathan and Uncle Robert couldn't reach them. I was preparing for the final confrontation when Uncle Robert made his move. That afternoon, 2 police officers appeared at my door with a warrant for my arrest on charges of embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraud. Uncle Robert had made good on his threat. As I was being led away in handcuffs, I saw him watching from a car across the street, his expression triumphant. The Montgomery name that had once been my birthright was now ensuring I spent the night in jail. I used my one phone call to contact the only lawyer I knew who wasn't on my family's payroll, a friend of Heather's who handled tenant disputes. I can't afford you, I admitted when he arrived at the police station. Let's worry about that later, he said, reviewing the charges. These are serious allegations, Miss Montgomery. Your family is claiming you stole over $2 million. It's a frame-up, I told him. I have proof. He looked skeptical but nodded. Then let's focus on getting you out on bail first. The bail hearing was set for the following morning. I spent the night in a cell wondering if this was how everything would end, with me in prison for crimes committed by the brother who had systematically destroyed my life. The next morning, my lawyer looked surprisingly optimistic as I was led into the courtroom. Something's happened, he whispered. The DA wants to talk. They're reconsidering the charges. Before I could ask what had changed, the bailiff announced the judge. As court proceedings began, I noticed a commotion at the back of the room. Rachel slipped in, followed by James from the gallery, and finally, to my utter shock, my father. Richard Montgomery looked older than when I'd last seen him, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. He didn't look at me as he took a seat in the last row. The prosecutor approached the bench, requesting a private conference with the judge. After several minutes of hushed conversation, the judge addressed the court. In light of new evidence submitted to the district attorney's office this morning, the Commonwealth is withdrawing all charges against Samantha Montgomery at this time. Miss Montgomery, you are free to go. I turned to my lawyer in confusion. What new evidence? He nodded toward Rachel, who held up her phone with a slight smile. As we left the courtroom, my father remained seated, staring straight ahead. I hesitated, then approached him. Thank you, I said quietly. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. I received some very disturbing videos this morning, from an anonymous source. His voice was strained. Is it true, Robert and Nathan? Every word I confirmed. They've been stealing from the company for over a year. They set me up to take the fall. He closed his eyes briefly. The Thanksgiving dinner. That was their idea. To publicly cut you off so no one would believe you if you made accusations later. And you went along with it. I believed them, he admitted, his voice barely audible. My own brother and son, I believed them over my daughter. The pain in his eyes was real, but I felt nothing but numbness. I'd spent a year fighting to reclaim my place in this family, and now that vindication was within reach, I realized I no longer needed it. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said, standing slowly, I deal with my brother and son. And you, he hesitated. You do whatever you want, Samantha. You've proven you don't need the Montgomery name to survive. He walked away without looking back, leaving me standing in the courthouse corridor with Rachel and my lawyer finally free, but wondering what freedom would actually mean. In the week following my arrest and release, Montgomery Properties descended into chaos. The videos Rachel had anonymously sent to my father, showing Nathan and Uncle Robert explicitly discussing their embezzlement scheme and plot against me, had blown the conspiracy wide open. My father had immediately suspended both Nathan and Uncle Robert pending an internal investigation. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. The family's carefully maintained public image was cracking. Emma was released from her father's control, moved temporarily into my tiny apartment for safety. Rachel broke up with Nathan, changing the locks on their shared condo and refusing his calls. They're panicking, Emma reported after speaking with the company's CFO. The forensic accountants have found at least $15 million in suspicious transfers so far. Nathan cleaned out his office yesterday. Uncle Robert hasn't been seen since your hearing. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I felt hollow. Winning hadn't brought the satisfaction I'd expected. My family was imploding, and despite everything they'd done to me, I took no joy in their destruction. Still, justice demanded completion. The evidence Nathan had collected, his insurance policy against Uncle Robert, needed to be shared with the authorities. Rachel had given me the laptop, but I hesitated to turn it over, knowing it would likely send my brother and uncle to prison. You're still protecting them, Emma observed, as I stared at the laptop one evening, after everything they did. Not protecting, I corrected. Just acknowledging that once this goes to the police, there's no going back. The Montgomery name will be synonymous with fraud. Your father's already planning damage control, she said. He's going to claim Nathan and Dad were operating without board knowledge, push all the blame onto them to save the company. The familiar tactics. Scapegoating to preserve the Montgomery empire. I'd been on the receiving end of that strategy. Then it's time everyone hears the whole truth, I decided. Not just about the embezzlement, but about how far they were willing to go to cover it up. I reached out to my mother, requesting a meeting. To my surprise, she agreed, suggesting the conservatory at the estate, her private sanctuary where she grew orchids away from my father's critical eye. Barbara Montgomery looked fragile when I arrived, her usual perfect composure fractured by the family crisis. She embraced me tentatively, which I allowed but did not return. I didn't know how far Robert and Nathan would go, she said immediately, as if rehearsed. The recording at our lunch, they told me it was just to document your mental state for your own protection. You knew they were setting me up, I said flatly. You chose them over me. Your own daughter. Tears filled her eyes. I was trying to protect the family name, Samantha. Everything your father built was more important than me. I know. I studied the woman who had raised me, seeing her clearly for the first time. Did you know about the embezzlement? No, she said quickly. Too quickly. I never understood the financial side. But you suspected something wasn't right, I pressed. That's why you were so uncomfortable when I started asking questions. You didn't want to know the truth because it would force you to take a side. She didn't deny it, which was confirmation enough. I'm turning everything over to the district attorney, I told her. All of it. The financial records, the recordings of Nathan and Uncle Robert planning to frame me the evidence of how you all systematically tried to destroy me to protect yourselves. You would do that to your own family, she asked, horrified. You all did much worse to me, I reminded her. I'm not doing this out of revenge, Mom. I'm doing it because it's right. Because no one else in this family seems capable of telling the truth. I left her among her orchids, their delicate beauty, contrasting with the ugliness that had consumed our family. 2 days later, I received an unexpected invitation Thanksgiving dinner at the Montgomery estate. 1 year to the day since I'd been publicly humiliated and cast out. It's a trap, Emma warned when I told her. Probably, I agreed. But it's also an opportunity to end this on my terms. I'm coming with you, she insisted. No, I said firmly. Someone needs to be outside with copies of everything in case this goes wrong. If I don't contact you by 9 p.m., send it all to the district attorney. I spent the day of Thanksgiving preparing myself mentally and emotionally for what was to come. I dressed simply but confidently. Dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a blazer. Professional but not trying to fit into the Montgomery mold. As I drove up the familiar winding driveway to the mansion, memories flooded back. Childhood Thanksgivings filled with laughter before money and power poisoned everything. Teenage years, when I first began to realize I didn't fit the code. Montgomery template, last year's devastating dinner that had changed everything. The security guard at the gate looked surprised to see me, but waved me through without question. The house was lit up beautifully against the November darkness, looking as perfect and intimidating as ever. I wasn't expected, judging by the housekeeper's shocked expression when she opened the door. "Miss Samantha." "We weren't told." "It's all right, Gloria," I assured her. "I know the way." I could hear voices from the formal dining room as I approached. My father's authoritative tone, my mother's softer responses, Nathan's distinctive laugh. So he was here after all, despite everything, acting as if nothing had happened. Typical. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. The table was set impeccably as always, crystal gleaming under the chandelier. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother to his right, Nathan to his left. Uncle Robert was nowhere to be seen, but several other relatives were present, including my grandmother and two of my father's cousins with their spouses. It was Nathan who noticed me first, his fork freezing halfway to his mouth. The others followed his gaze, conversation dying as they registered my presence. "Samantha," my father said, recovering first. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied, stepping into the room. "But it seemed appropriate. 1 year ago today, you all sat at this table and watched as I was humiliated and cast out. I thought you might want to hear the full story of what happened next." "This is hardly the time," my mother began nervously. "It's exactly the time," I countered. "When the entire family is gathered to celebrate togetherness and gratitude. What better moment to discuss how two members of this family conspired to steal millions from the company while framing me for their crimes?" Nathan stood abruptly. "You have no right to come here and make accusations." "Sit down, Nathan," my father commanded, his voice like ice. He turned to the others at the table. "I apologize, but I need to speak with my children privately. Please enjoy your dessert in the drawing room." The relatives filed out, my grandmother squeezing my hand as she passed, the only gesture of support from anyone. When we were alone, just my parents, Nathan and me, my father spoke again. "I've seen the videos, Nathan. I know what you and Robert did." Nathan's face flushed. "Those videos are taken out of context. Robert manipulated me." "Stop lying," I interrupted. "The laptop you kept in storage unit 423 has everything, Nathan. Every conversation, every transfer, every step of your plan to destroy me when I became inconvenient." His eyes widened in shock. "How did you?" "Rachel," I said simply. "She chose the truth over you. Everyone seems to be doing that lately." "Robert is gone," my father said heavily. "Left the country 2 days ago. Switzerland, we think. Beyond extradition." "Of course he is," I nodded. "And you're trying to convince Nathan to take the fall alone, aren't you? To protect what's left of the company reputation." My father didn't deny it. "Montgomery Properties employs over 500 people, Samantha. We have a responsibility to them." "You have a responsibility to the truth," I countered. "Something this family has never valued much." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Says the artist who contributed nothing to building this company. You've always taken the benefits of the Montgomery name while looking down on the work that created it." "I never wanted to destroy the company, Nathan. I just wanted to find my own path. You're the one who chose to steal from it." "Because I saw how easily Dad was going to hand you control of a major division," he exploded. "Years of business school, working 80-hour weeks, proving myself over and over, and he was going to put you in charge of the arts district because you can paint pretty pictures. That was my decision to make," our father interjected coldly. "And you had no right to subvert it by criminal means." "The board will oust you if this goes public," Nathan warned. "Is that what you want, Samantha, to destroy Dad too?" "I want accountability," I said firmly. "I spent a year rebuilding my life after you systematically destroyed it. I was almost arrested for your crimes. Emma was physically injured in a staged accident. You tried to erase me to cover your theft." I placed a USB drive on the table. "This contains all the evidence. Tomorrow morning I'm taking it to the district attorney unless we reach an agreement tonight." My father leaned forward. "What kind of agreement?" "First, Nathan publicly confesses to everything. The embezzlement, framing me, all of it. He returns every penny he stole and faces the legal consequences." Nathan started to protest, but my father silenced him with a gesture. Second, I continued Montgomery Properties, establishes a foundation for supporting emerging artists with Emma in charge and a substantial annual budget, a permanent reminder of this family's commitment to making amends. And third, my father asked, recognizing there would be more. Third, you tell the truth at the next board meeting. About everything. No scapegoating Robert entirely. No pretending you knew nothing. You take responsibility for the failures and oversight that allowed this to happen. My father considered me with new respect. You've become quite the negotiator. I've had to become many things this past year. Few of them by choice. Nathan slumped in his chair, defeated. I'll be ruined. Possibly jailed. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy me, I said, without sympathy. My father was silent for a long moment. I've lost one child to greed and another to my own blindness, he finally said. I won't compound those mistakes. He nodded slowly. I accept your terms, Samantha. Richard, you can't, my mother began. I can and I will, he interrupted firmly. Nathan will face the consequences of his actions. The company will make amends. And I will take responsibility for my failures. He turned to me. Will you come back to the company afterward, help rebuild what's been damaged? I shook my head. My place isn't here anymore. I've built my own life now, one that can't be taken away on a whim. As I prepared to leave, my father walked me to the door. I failed you, Samantha. I see that now. Yes, I agreed. But recognizing that is the first step toward making it right. I drove away from the Montgomery estate that night, knowing I would never again define myself by its standards or seek its approval. The confrontation hadn't brought the vindictive satisfaction Nathan or Uncle Robert might have expected. Instead, it had brought clarity and finally the chance for genuine healing to begin. The weeks following that final Thanksgiving confrontation unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. True to our agreement, Nathan made a full confession to the authorities about his role in the embezzlement scheme and the conspiracy to frame me. He implicated Uncle Robert, though by then my uncle was safely ensconced in his Swiss chalet, beyond the reach of American justice. Nathan's sentencing hearing was a subdued affair. The judge showed little sympathy for a privileged young man who had abused his position of trust, sentencing him to 6 years in federal prison. As they led him away, our eyes met briefly. There was no animosity left between us, just a hollow recognition of all that had been lost. My father kept his word as well, taking full responsibility with the board for the failures and oversight that had allowed the embezzlement to occur. He narrowly survived a vote of no confidence, retaining his position as CEO, but with significantly diminished authority and a reconstituted board that included several independent directors. The Montgomery name, once synonymous with unimpeachable business success, was tarnished. The company would survive, but the dynasty my grandfather had built would never be the same. As for me, the initial months after the truth came out were physically and emotionally grueling. The adrenaline that had carried me through a year of fighting suddenly evaporated, leaving me exhausted to my core. I slept for days, waking only to eat before collapsing again. Your body is finally processing the trauma, Emma explained gently during one of her daily visits to check on me. You never gave yourself time to feel it before. Emma had emerged from the family implosion as perhaps its only real winner. Free from her father's controlling influence, she had accepted the role of heading the newly established Montgomery Arts Foundation with a $20 million endowment and a mandate to support emerging artists across New England. The irony isn't lost on me, she admitted over coffee one crisp February morning, that something good could come from such darkness. It's not ironic, I corrected her. It's justice. You were always meant for more than being Uncle Robert's obedient daughter. My mother reached out hesitantly in the spring, inviting me to lunch at a neutral location. Not the family estate or any of our old haunts, but a small cafe in a neighborhood I now frequented. She looked different, less polished, more human somehow. The perfectly coiffed corporate wife had been replaced by a woman still elegant but noticeably more authentic. I've started therapy, she confessed after we ordered. Your father thinks it's ridiculous, of course. And what do you think I asked? She considered the question seriously. I think I spent 30 years being Richard Montgomery's wife at the expense of being Barbara Kincaid, the person I was before I married into all this. I think I sacrificed my daughter's well-being to preserve a facade. I think it's long overdue. It wasn't an explicit apology, but from a woman who had been raised never to admit weakness or fault, it was significant progress. We began meeting monthly after that, slowly rebuilding a relationship that was no longer based on my conformity to Montgomery expectations. My father was a different story. He approached reconciliation like a business negotiation, proposing a formal role for me in the company that would utilize my artistic sensibilities while bringing me back into the fold. The arts district development is still viable, he explained during a tense dinner at his club. We've cleared out all the shell companies Robert and Nathan created. It could be yours to lead as I originally intended. I studied him across the table. Still imposing, still authoritative, but visibly humbled by recent events. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but that's not my path anymore. Disappointment flashed across his face. Samantha, this is an opportunity to rejoin the family legacy on your terms. To show everyone that a Montgomery perseveres. I don't need to prove anything to everyone, Dad. And I don't need the Montgomery name to validate my worth anymore. He struggled to comprehend a perspective so foreign to his worldview. Then what do you want? A relationship with my father that doesn't depend on me working for him, I said simply. One based on mutual respect rather than conditions and expectations. It was a concept he found deeply challenging, but to his credit, he tried. Our occasional dinners were often awkward conversations, stilted, but we were both making an effort, perhaps for the first time. Meanwhile, my career was flourishing in unexpected ways. The small show at James's gallery had led to others, each more successful than the last. My paintings, raw emotional explorations of betrayal, resilience, and rebirth, resonated with critics and collectors alike. Your work has transformed, James observed at the opening of my largest show yet. There's an authenticity to it now, a hard-won wisdom that wasn't there before. He wasn't wrong. The comfortable, technically proficient, but emotionally safe art I'd created before had been replaced by something more vulnerable, more truthful. Pain had deepened my work in ways comfort never could have. By the following Thanksgiving, 2 years after that fateful dinner when my father had cut me off, I had achieved a level of success that was entirely my own. My paintings commanded prices that allowed me to move into a beautiful loft studio in the city. I had hired an assistant to manage the growing demand for commissions. Most importantly, I had built a reputation based solely on my talent, not my last name. For that Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner in my new space. Not the elaborate formal affair of Montgomery tradition, but a gathering of the people who had sustained me through the darkest period of my life. Heather came bringing her new boyfriend. Emma arrived with bottles of wine and stories of the emerging artists her foundation was supporting. Rachel, who had moved to Chicago to make a fresh start, flew in specially for the occasion. Diane from the gallery brought her husband. James attended with his partner. Even my mother accepted my invitation, arriving slightly nervous but bearing homemade cranberry sauce, something I'd never seen her make in all my years growing up with household staff. "Your father sends his regards," she said, kissing my cheek. "He's in London closing the Harrington deal." I nodded unsurprised but no longer wounded by his absence. Our relationship was improving slowly, but there were still boundaries he struggled to cross, like entering a space where he wasn't automatically the most important person in the room. As we gathered around my table, a beautiful reclaimed wood piece I'd found at an estate sale, nothing like the formal Montgomery dining table, I looked at the faces of these people who had helped me rebuild my life from ashes. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I want to thank you all. 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. I was wrong. What I lost was everything that didn't matter. Status, financial security, a family name. What I found instead was my true strength, my authentic voice, and people who value me for who I am, not what I represent." Emma raised her glass in response. "To finding our true selves, even when it's the hardest path. To making your own way," Rachel added. "To chosen family," Heather concluded. We ate and laughed and shared stories late into the night. When everyone had gone except Emma, who was staying in my guest room, we sat by the windows overlooking the city lights. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. Standing up to them, knowing what it would cost? I considered the question seriously. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my brother chose greed over family, that my parents chose appearances over truth. I took a sip of wine. But I don't regret finding out who I really am when everything external is stripped away. That knowledge is worth everything I lost." "You gained more than you lost," she observed. "We both did," I agreed. "Freedom isn't just about escaping control. It's about discovering who you are without it." The Montgomery name had once been my identity, my security, my prison. Losing it had been my greatest fear, then my most painful reality. But in that loss, I had found something far more valuable. Myself on my own terms, creating a life that couldn't be given or taken away by anyone else. That was the true inheritance I had claimed. Not money or status or approval, but the unshakable knowledge of my own resilience, creativity, and worth. So, what has your family taught you about your true worth? Have you ever had to stand up against people who were supposed to protect you? Drop a comment below and share your story. I read every one. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life journeys. Remember, sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the first step to finding what you truly deserve. Thank you for being here with me today.